This video is the first in a series of videos that are being prepared for the 350th anniversary of Barashwa, which will be starting in the summer of 2022. Each video will be a presentation of the origins of a family currently living in the Barashwa area. Today we are talking to Carolyn DeVouges about her roots and the first DeVouges that arrived in this area. Carolyn, thank you very much for helping us with the history of the DeVouges family. We're wondering if you could tell us about your ancestors, the first DeVouges and his descendants, and where they came from, and anything else you'd like to share with us.
Okay. The first descendant came from France, Bordeaux, France. His name was Pierre-André DeVouges. He landed at Point St. Peter's in Malbaie. And this was during the early 1800s. He's the forefather of all the DeVouges living in North America today. Along with him came his wife, Mary Jane Francis Beaulieu. Shortly after they arrived here at Point St. Peter, she received a message that her father was very ill. So she returned to France to settle her father's estate. While she was in France, her first son was born. Then she returned back to St. Peter's, Malbaie, to join her husband.
So they lived in Malbaie their whole lives?
They lived in Point St. Peter's, yes.
Wow.
I have the passport of Pierre-André DeVouges when he came across and landed in down in St. Pierre, the Malbaie.
We can see from the passport that Pierre-André DeVouges was 31 years old. He was 5'11" tall at 1.73 meters. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, a blonde beard. His chin was round and his face was oval. His complexion was colored, possibly from being outside, and he had no distinctive features.
But it's not the passports of today, trust me. It's a full, like 2 sheets. So it's not our little passport of today. And they were Catholic when they came across. They were both Catholic, but when they arrived here, he was working and he took his second son, to be christened. And the priest refused to have the baby christened because he hadn't been at church. So, being said that they were contrary to DeVouges, he went to the minister. And he got the minister to christen his son, and this is how we got changed over into, then we were all Anglican. And from then on, now these days, it's mixed. It's Catholic and Anglican, but the first DeVouges, from him, all his children were Anglican, christened Anglican, because of the words they had with the priest.
Peter and Jane had a total of 6 boys and 1 girl. In 1861, their oldest son, Peter DeVouges Jr., married Susan Jane Varden, and they are shown in the 1871 census as having 4 children and living in the area. Their second son, Charles, moved to Wisconsin, where he died in 1870 at 30 years old.
And they were pure French. They couldn't talk English. They only started to talk English when they met people down here, and everybody was English. So then they were French, and then they were English because of the English people. They were Catholic, and then everything got changed over to Anglican. So it was a total change for them.
Okay.
And there's a stone in Malbaie graveyard where you'll find it in the Anglican churchyard where they're buried.
In 1865, 24-year-old illustrator Thomas Pye from New Brunswick created this engraving of Point Saint Pierre. Peter DeVouges family would have been owners of some of the many buildings shown here.
My grandfather would always laugh and call me contrary DeVouges. He'd always say, and I'd argue with him for fun. We'd just argue just little things, and I wouldn't give up. And he'd say, okay, have it your way, old Peter. So I think that was his great uncle.
Peter DeVouges.
Peter DeVouges, yeah. And he'd say, have it your way, old Peter. So I'm assuming that's where the contrariness come from.
And what was your grandfather's name?
Horace DeVouges.
Horace? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. The census of 1871 shows the possibility that 64-year-old Peter DeVouges, his wife, and 3 of his children lived between Aubin-Bond and then 31-year-old John Legros, an agent for Charles Robin and his wife and children. And according to Carolyn and her relatives, Mr. Cecil DeVouges and her uncle, Austin DeVouges, the Legros house, the beautiful stately house at Point St. Peter, was actually first built by Peter DeVouges and then later occupied by the Legros. Carolyn is the 5th generation of DeVouges in the Barachois and Malbaie area, which now includes 7 generations. Thank you, Carolyn, for sharing with us the origins of the DeVouges family in this area. We will finish with some sounds and images of the great-grandson of Pierre-André DeVouges, who recently passed away at the age of 92, Mr. Austin DeVouges, the last of his generation. This video is the first in a series of videos that are being prepared for the 350th anniversary of Barachois, which will be starting in the summer of 2022. Each video will be a presentation of the origins of a family currently living in the Barachois area.